Welcome. Many households tend to resist annuitization. A new study has just been released called What Makes Annuitization More Appealing? My guest is one of the co-authors of the study, Stephen Zeldes, the Graduate School of Business at Columbia University. In this paper, they try to identify some of the factors that influence consumer attitudes toward annuitization, focusing on product design and choice architecture. Stephen, it's a great pleasure. Thanks for taking the time today.
Sure, nice to be here. Thank you.
So let's talk about the study overall. What were you trying to find out here?
So our broad research agenda is to try to understand why people don't seem to want or choose or value annuities typically. We want to try to understand some of the economic barriers and some of the psychological barriers and possibly some of the biases that exist in the way annuities are presented to people and what behavioral economists call the choice architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to do that both within defined benefit, understand that both within defined benefit and defined contribution plans. And then once we've done that, our goal is to try to see what could be done to potentially make annuities or products like them more appealing, either by changing product design, and we think there's some scope for that, or by changing choice architecture, the way that the communications materials and the way these things are presented to individuals.
Okay.
So that's the broad goal of our research agenda.
And talk about the methodology that you use to get the information.
So for this particular study, we did a survey. We conducted a survey ourselves of a total of about 5,000 people, U.S. residents between the ages of 50 and 75. This was an internet survey through a survey research firm. And we asked them a set of questions. We designed our own survey, and we asked them a set of questions related to pensions and related to retirement saving, but particularly focusing on the issue of longevity protection and annuities.
Mm-hmm.
So we had actually two surveys, one that had about 1,000 people, and the second one had about 4,000 people. And in the first one, we told them that we put them in a hypothetical situation and said that they're about to, imagine they were 65 and about to retire, and they're working for a company that will give them pension payments every month for the rest of their lives after they retired, and pointed out that the payments would stop after they die, and asked them a series of questions basically focusing on whether people wanted to take a lifetime income option or a lump sum option. In the second survey, it was similar to that, except for we said to them that you're about to retire and have accumulated $500,000 in the pension plan at your current employer. So we focused this around, the second survey we focused around something that would be more like either a cash balance setting or a defined contribution setting, whereas the first survey was oriented a little bit more toward a traditional defined benefit setting. So we asked them a series of questions, partly related to how much they'd like to take as a lifetime income stream versus a lump sum. Mm-hmm. We asked them a set of questions about the slopes of the retirement income that they would like, so whether they would like one that's sort of flat in nominal terms or falling or rising. And then we also did some variations related to inflation as well. And we asked them, related to that, we asked them about the demand for lifetime income streams that were inflation protected. You know, mm-hmm. To what extent would they be willing to pay by a lower initial payment, through a lower initial payment, for an income stream that was protected against inflation, included a cost of living increase. Then we asked them a bit about some of the reasons behind their choices. We asked some demographic questions, and then we did some separate treatments where we looked at the effects of certain things. So one of the things we looked at was the all or nothing choice versus a partial annuitization choice.
Right.
So in one treatment, people either they took a full lump sum or they had to take the full amount as a lifetime income stream. That we gave that to a subset of the population, and then to the other part of the population, we gave them a series of choices. It could be basically between 0 and 100 by increments of 25%. So they could take 0, 25, 50, 75, 100. Mm-hmm. So that was one experiment that we did within our survey. And another one was that we changed the language that was used to describe the lifetime income payout. We tried a set of different languages to see how that language could potentially affect outcomes and choices as well.
Mm-hmm. And so, you know, looking at the information here, some people have a predisposition toward having a negative view of annuities, partially because they may not understand them or they've heard things about them. And in this particular case, it looks like the big message here from what you just said is that people are far more willing to consider an annuitization strategy if it doesn't involve their entire asset portfolio. So
yes,
a partial annuitization is a lot easier for them to take or to understand.
Yes. So one of the findings, we had really 5 key findings in what we did.
Okay.
We had 5 key findings in this research paper. One of them had to do with the partial annuitization, and yes, we found that allowing a partial annuitization option increased annuitization overall. It increased the number of people who took some annuity. It increased, but not only that, it increased the overall amount of annuitization. In other words, the fraction of wealth, the total that was annuitized, went up, and we thought that was an interesting result.
Okay, so you're saying that by offering a partial annuitization, the overall amount increases?
Yes, by offering a partial annuitization, there's some people who move from saying 0 before into the middle, and there's some people who move from 100% into the middle, but the overall effect in terms of where they move and the overall annuitization amounts turned out to be higher when you offer people this continuous choice as opposed to forcing them into an all-or-nothing choice.
You also said as part of the research there was a part of it here to look at maybe design characteristics of products. Talk about your findings there and how, you know, if there were certain design features that were important to people and others that probably exist that aren't that important.
Yes. So we broke those down into obstacles and motivations. The obstacles, the 2 main sets of obstacles that we found were the loss of flexibility and control that are part of buying an annuity, and the counterparty risk, the concern that maybe either if in the defined benefit setting, maybe that the company wasn't going to be around to pay off, or in the defined contribution setting, maybe that the insurance company that they would get it from might not be around, but some concern on the counterparty risk side. Those were the 2 key obstacles that we picked up, the 2 most important sets of obstacles. Again, the loss of flexibility and control and the counterparty risk.
Were there any other key findings in the study that you think are worth mentioning?
Yes, we had a few. One was that had to do with the slope of the profile, the income profile that people wanted. And we found that people generally did not want declining slopes, declining real slopes of their payout. In other words, after adjusting for inflation, people didn't like the idea of having their standard of living associated with their pension payout decline over time. And generally, they preferred slopes that were either flat or rising, taking into account the fact, of course, that if they were rising, they'd have to start at a lower level because we set these paths to have the same present value. So even accounting for that, people seem to want flat or rising profiles. We also found on the cost of living question that when we highlighted inflation, when we told people specifically what inflation can do to the purchasing power of their income over time, that dramatically increased take-up rates for cost of living adjustments. So without that, we had divided the population into 2 sets, and the set that we didn't emphasize that with had much lower COLA take-up rates than the segment of the population where we highlighted inflation and what it can do to the purchasing power over time. So that suggests that framing effects around cost of living adjustments are potentially important.
Okay.
So that's one set of results. The next one had to do with the way you ask questions when you ask people how much of a lump sum do you want versus how much lifetime income do you want.
Right.
And we tried a variety of different ways of posing the question. And we found that emphasizing flexibility and control, the lack of it in the standard annuity, tended to reduce annuity take-up. So when we included a mention of that, and we put it in a sliding scale and talked about control and flexibility, that tended to reduce take-up for annuitization.
Okay.
We also found that posing it in an investment framework, so that kind of telling people you get more if you live a long time, you get less if you don't live a long time, and focusing on that as an investment return, that tended to reduce take-up rates as well.
Okay.
And relative to putting it out in a consumption or insurance framework where it kind of protects you, talking about how it protects you against outliving your resources.
So if someone, so just to clarify, so if an advisor was talking about this and using traditional investment terminology, it doesn't work as well as essentially separating it as a completely different product.
Correct. Those were the ones that we found did have an impact, and then there were some other ones that we tried that didn't have a change on people's decisions. We tried giving them the total dollar amount that they would be receiving over their lifetime. That didn't seem to make that much of a difference. We tried to explain to them how mortality credits worked.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't make a difference, although it's possible that it was, we weren't doing it in as clear a way as we could have, or they just still didn't understand it. But that didn't seem to help either in terms of take-up rates.
All right. Well, it's very interesting stuff. Again, great study, really informative. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you.